Okay, we're back live. Energy Boom 101. Dispatch from the patch 8, actually. Still here with guest cameraman for the day, T-Mac. Unbelievable professionalism and a rather harmonious sense of being, I would like to add. It's been a lovely, lovely companion on this journey. Anyway, huge breaking news. Pardon me, Wall Street Journal. I've never heard of this paper before. I don't know where it came from. It came from yesterday, Tuesday, October 15th. Opinion page, why OPEC no longer calls the shots. Okay, so this is an opinion page, so that's not necessarily a fact, but it is written by Daniel Trevino, vice chairman of IHS. Trust me, he's an incredibly respected thinker on energy, so whenever he says something, we read it. Someone else put the headline up, but here's what it says. Why OPEC no longer calls the shots. And for this dispatch, all I'm going to do is read this whole damn article, and that's it. And then we'll comment on it a little bit if we need to. And we'll do it from the glorious backdrop of Boom U. Daniel Trevino, by the way, I bet comes to OU at some point. How about that for a little prediction? Here we go. 40 years ago, on October 17, 1973, the world experienced its first oil shock as Arab exporters declared an embargo on shipments to Western countries. This is huge energy history, folks. The OPEC embargo was prompted by America's military support for Israel, which was repelling a coordinated surprise attack by Arab countries that had begun on October 6th, the sacred Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. So, I think this is a pretty good intro in exactly what the energy world is all about. It's heavily woven in with, to say the least, politics and the deepest questions of our existence, because the first two paragraphs here we talk about the old world countries and a lot of what goes on in the Middle East can be very can have a turmoil to it. But let's continue here. With prices quadrupling in the next few months, the oil crisis set off an upheaval in global politics and the world economy. It also challenged America's position in the world, polarized its politics at home, and shook the country's confidence. So, pretty amazing, heavy stuff that went on back then. That was 1973. This is 2013, quite a few years later. Yet the crisis meant even more because it was the birth of the modern era of energy. Although the OPEC embargo seemed to provide proof that the world was running short of oil resources, the move by Arab exporters did the opposite. It provided massive incentive to develop new oil fields outside of the Middle East, what became known as non-OPEC, led by drilling in the North Sea and Alaska. Wow, talk about the law of unintended consequences. Crazy stuff. The Prudhoe Bay oil field was discovered in Alaska 5 years before that crisis. Yet opposition by environmentalists had prevented approval for a pipeline to bring the oil down from the North Slope. Very much a prequel to the current battle over the Keystone XL pipeline. Only in the immediate aftermath of the embargo did a shaken Congress approve a pipeline that eventually added its peak as much as 2 million barrels a day to the domestic supply. So a nice little bit of background he's giving you here for what's sort of shaping the modern energy era. We'll continue. What are we into this now? 2 or 3 minutes?
3:30.
Not bad. 3:30, good time. The push to find alternatives to oil boosted nuclear power and coal as secure domestic sources of electric power. Yeah, I remember that. The 1973 crisis spawned the modern wind and solar industries, too. By 1975, 5,000 people were flooding into Washington, D.C. for a conference on solar energy, which had been until then only a subject for eco-freaks, as one writer noted at the time. That same year, Congress passed the first corporate average fuel economy standards, which required automakers to double fuel efficiency from 13.5 miles per gallon to 27 miles per gallon. Wow. Ultimately saving about 2 million barrels of oil per day. The standards were raised in 2012 to 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. So we did it again. Good job, America. France launched a war on energy waste, and Japan, short of resources and fearing that its economic miracle was at risk, began a drive for energy efficiency. Despite enormous growth in the U.S. economy since 1973, oil consumption today is up less than 7%. Another big fact that most people don't know is that the United States is consuming less oil than we have. I think we peaked out about 5 years ago. We'll see. The crisis also set the stage for the emergence of new importers that have growing weight in the global oil market, which is what we call the global energy rainbow. Where is that global oil market? In 1973, most oil was consumed in the developed economies of North America, Western Europe, and Japan, two-thirds as late as 2000. But now oil consumption is flat or falling in those economies, and virtually all growth in demand is in developing economies, now better known as emerging markets. They represent half of the world's oil consumption today, and their share will continue to increase. Exporting countries, United States, will increasingly reorient themselves to these markets. Last month, China overtook the U.S. as the world's largest net importer of oil. Holy smacks. Shocking news. A lasting lesson of the crisis years is the power of markets and their ability to adjust to disruptions, if government allows them to. Oh, nice. The iconic images of the 1970s, gas lines and angry motorists, are trotted out whenever some new disruption happens. Yet those gas lines weren't the results of markets. They were largely self-inflicted results of government interference in markets with price controls and supply allocation. Okay, you can see where we're going here. Today, the oil market is much more transparent owing to the development of futures markets. And that's the name of this show, The Transparent Barrel. And I've never even talked to this guy. That's crazy. And I bet Vladimir Putin has something to do with it. The 1970s were also years of natural gas shortages, which turned into a bitter political issue, particularly within the Democratic Party. Many at the time attributed these shortages to geology, but they too were the result of regulation and price controls. What solved the shortages wasn't more controls, but their elimination, which resulted in an oversupply that became known as the gas bubble, which we now have. We have an oversupply of gas in the United States. Today, abundant natural gas is the default fuel for the new electricity generation. That's also true. The lesson is that markets and price signals can work very efficiently and surprisingly swiftly, even in crises, if they are allowed to. There will be future energy disruptions because there is still much political risk around oil. In 2013, the Middle East is still in turmoil, but the alignments are different. In 1973, Iran was one of America's strongest allies in the Middle East. Tehran didn't participate in the embargo and pushed oil into the market. But since the 1979 Islamist Revolution, Washington and Tehran have been adversaries. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia, which was at the center of the 1973 embargo, is now America's strongest Arab ally. Crazy, crazy things happen in the oil world. Strange bedfellows in the global energy rainbow. The real lesson of the shock of 1973 and the second oil shock set off by the overthrow of Iran's Shah in 1979 is that they provided incentives and imperatives to develop new resources. Today, total world oil production is 50% greater than in 1973. Wow. Exploration in the North Sea and Alaska was only the beginning. In the early 1990s, offshore production expanded farther out into the Gulf of Mexico, opening up deep water as a new oil frontier. In the late 1990s, Canadian oil sands embarked on an era of growth that today makes them a larger source of oil than Libya before its 2011 civil war. They had a 2011 civil war in Libya. Most recent is the development of tight oil, the spin-off from shale gas, which has increased U.S. oil output by more than 50% since 2008. So let's just throw another number at you. In the last 5 years, the United States has increased its oil output by 50%. I would say there's a game going on here, folks. We're going to do our best to follow it, to track it, to maybe even capture it. Who knows? This boom in domestic output increases energy supply, and combined with shale gas has a much wider economic impact in jobs, investment, and household income. As these tight oil supplies increase, and as the U.S. auto fleet becomes more efficient, oil imports have declined. Imports reached 60% of domestic consumption in 2005. They are now down to 35%. So we're producing more oil, we're consuming less oil. You can sort of see where this is going. As the U.S. imports less oil, it also produces more to the benefit of energy security. There are several million barrels of oil now missing from the world oil market, owing to sanctions on Iranian oil, disappointments in Iraqi production, and disruptions to varying degrees in Libya, South Sudan, Nigeria, and Yemen. The shortfall is being partly made up by Saudi Arabia, which is producing at its highest level. But the growth in U.S. oil output has been crucial in compensating for these missing million barrels. Without it, the world would be looking at higher oil prices. There would be talk of a possible new oil crisis, and no doubt Americans would once again start seeing images of those gas lines and angry motorists from 1973. I leave you with that. And another little note, there's a $1,500 bottle of scotch you can buy, and it's from 1973. Coincidence, once again? I don't know. 3, 2, 1, boom, we're out.